Well, that idea kind of, simmered in my mind for a few more years because I couldn't quite justify in my mind just doing it the easy way. That wasn't enough of a reason to change because I kind of felt lazy if I was just going to change just to make it easier.
Honestly, I can remember the day when I had just kind of enough of the old way. We grew up calving through the barn and all that, and I was talking with my dad when we were trying to bring in some more cows ready to calve, and I was just thought there has to be, a different way to do this, wading through mud and dealing with the weather and getting ready for storms and every cow having to go through the barn. So we made the change. That's when I knew that I was looking for something different. It's still a challenge when you're dealing with a different generation. My dad accepted, he could see where we were coming from and why it was logical and why it was good. But dealing with that different generation and I think what it comes down to is you're dealing with what their peer group thinks, and that's what held up change on our place. From my grandpa, that was a big thing for him, just seeing that no one around is really doing this stuff. So, it's got to be, you're the oddball, you feel like, with it. For me, it wasn't a factor. I didn't care about those things. It made sense, it was logical, we're going to do it. And for my dad, he was a little slower, and my grandpa was just, put up a wall to that, which, looking back, I can understand that. I can understand his reservations, but it was all external things that were influencing that. It wasn't anything that didn't make sense about the process. I've got friends who that is a hang up, like they want to have their calving done before the farming happens, but when you get it this way and calving this later, this in sync, the calving problems are not worth checking on. We're to the point with it where my dad and I will drive through the cows together several times a week together, and where we almost say we need a job, because I wouldn't want to pay me for the revenue I'm bringing in to do that job, to drive through those cows, to have no problems. I mean, we'll still have dead calves, we'll still have things like that happen, but we aren't the difference maker in that scenario. You couldn't justify our labor for it.
We calved in March basically because that's the way it had always been done. Some of the thought process behind it was the ground is still froze. You're going to get the calves, get the cows through calving. They'll be on the cow. They're ready then to go out to pasture. That's how they've done it. And then once your spring's where it comes along for getting into the fields, your cattle will basically be done calving, so you don't have to worry about the cows so much while you're working in the fields. But as my own personal situation changed, I physically couldn't do that anymore. It just, the labor of handling all the animals, feeding them, putting them in the barn at night during the daytime when it was storming, having to pair them up and put them in the barn, feed them, clean the pens, getting ready for the next cow-calf pair to come in. It just was too physically demanding on my body.
The reason we were calving in March is because we looked at it from a production standpoint rather than an economic standpoint of when we were calving. In other words, we felt that we had to have big calves in the fall to produce more money. We were looking at it strictly from a selling standpoint and not from a profit standpoint. And so when we were in financial straits and had to change our operation and started working in tune with nature instead of all about the production and realizing that our natural resources were probably what was really the important part of our operation. And so when we did that, it was just a natural to move to later calving. And actually the real aha moment is those, what we used to consider late calves, that were the easy ones in our operation when we were calving in March. So we had an example in front of us, we were just ignoring it.
The other part of the motivation is, you know, they've got the calving pasture that they calve in, and they like to calve in that pasture, you know, in the month of March, so they can get them moved out of there, because they're either going to be farming during the busy time of year, which it could be April, or they just need to start the rotation. And so for them to see doing something different when their family's done it this way for 3 generations, you know, that change it's not easy.
Most ranchers do what they do because it's just kind of filtered down through generations. And what worked 40 years ago, and what seemed to be the right thing to do then, just doesn't seem to work as well anymore. And I think we're calving out, a lot of people are calving out bigger numbers, and so that's part of it. I think that there are ranchers that probably didn't calve in February and March, say 50 or 60 years ago. And so I'm not really sure why that. An interesting part of why ranchers do what they do, at least my wife, and I've heard other people say it, don't have the same paradigms that we do. That they question all the time why we do. You know, why are you calving now? You know, if you're doing it in a snowbank, it doesn't make any sense. And and I think we're kind of stubborn. We're set in our ways.
And it's interesting that you say, why wasn't it obvious? I can't tell you how many women friends I've talked to, especially early on when we were first starting this early calving. And I would tell them about it and how great it is and the Mother Nature thing and the good weather. And they're like, why don't we all do that? The women were just very, very open to it. So I'm not going to say that it's stubbornness at all on the part of men, but I think they were just brought up that way, and nobody likes change. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do.
So my advice for young couples that are starting out, especially in the ranching things now, it's things can be a lot easier than you think they can be, because you always think, well, I can't do this because we got to go feed or we got to calve out. But if you move to a later date, the cows can take care of themselves. They're able, because cows never used to get fed all the time. And that's kind of our human mentality now, is we've got to feed the cows, we got to take care of the cows, but they can actually take care of themselves. But we've actually changed how cows live, not on their own anymore.
I've always been a part of it, you know, when we calved in the shed and did that, you know, I'd watch at night and Pat watch in day, or vice versa, and pair out and tag and all of that. And Pat still, you know, we started like in April, and then you'd have blizzards in April. So then pretty soon, you know, it was gradual, but fun's now. Then it wasn't fun. It was work, but then it was good because you could tell people how hard you worked, and you could tell all your horror stories. You know, that was always fun to be able to compare horror stories to horror stories. But now we don't have that, so, you know, so then you don't talk very much at coffee shops. I think in some regards we're going back almost to the old way of how our grandparents did it versus this new way of, and I don't remember my dad feeding much hay either, you know, when I was a young girl. So I don't necessarily say that calving early and all of this was necessarily our grandparents' way. I think it's more the new way, because we've got tractors and we've got all this new equipment, and so we got to use it. And, you know.
Probably in the 90s, we were calving mid-March to later March starting. And in 1999, I turned the bulls out July 20th, which would give you about a May 1st calving date. And it just went really good, but in the cattle, I sold them in January instead of November-ish. And everything worked really good, but I didn't know anybody else that did it. Pretty soon we just kind of went back into, well, everybody else kicked their bulls out, let's kick ours out. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I just got tired of it, and we went back to May 1st calving, and that's where we've been since. Just because you're so different than anybody else, your calves are smaller, you got a brand later. It worked really good, but now there's a lot more people doing it, so you're not the weird guy, But still, it's I can't think of the word, but stigma of, you're different, and it's like, why are you not, why are you not like everybody else?
You don't always have to do what Grandpa did, but don't forget why he did it. Things to watch out for if you're trying to start this is really your paradigm or other people, Every problem is a people problem. That comes from David Pratt, but it's what your neighbors perceive of you. It's what your family perceives. Some of it's perceived as laziness instead of smart. There's one thing that when I tell people when I calve, they always say, oh, you're smart or you're lucky. And I really can't see either one of them being true, because I'm not that smart, and you can decide when you turn out your bulls just as well as I can. So luck really had nothing to do with it. Yeah, why is fall calving accepted and May calving not accepted? And everybody thinks of May calving as summer calving, and it's not. It's truly spring calving. June isn't. Summer doesn't start till almost the end of June. So, and I tell you the truth, most of us are done calving by then anyway. And what I've noticed too is it really don't matter if you calve in February or May. Everybody calves in May. I don't know what it is about it, but there's people that try to pull their bulls, but everybody's got late calvers, and we start 45 to 60 days after a lot of people, and a lot of times we're done calving before they are. And so it's funny how that's not accepted. I don't know the answer there why it's not.
We've been fighting this thing for years and years, and just because Grandpa did it that way and Dad did it that way doesn't mean that was wrong, but that was the way they did it, and this was a different option. So with the help of my family and my wife mainly, she was my cheerleader on this, and we decided to move our calving date back, and so we did. And it quite an eye-opener. You think you've got to live with them cows, and we don't. We soon found out that we didn't have to. As the years went along, our cow herd changed. They were quieter, they were easier to get along with. We calved the first calf heifers right out with the cows, take them as far away from the buildings as you can, and just let them calve. They make better mothers. And we just went with it.
I'm a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. I do care about what my neighbors think, but it's not to the point where I mean, we're all about family in the Lakota culture, so we're always care, but I don't let them determine what I'm going to do.
Not one bit, because I stopped really worrying about what the neighbors thought a long time ago. I do what we need to do for our operation and what's best for us, our land, and our cattle. And I don't really worry about what the neighbors think.
Between what the land we own, deeded land, and what we've leased all these years, we've run 225 mother cows, Angus cows. kind of a traditional cow-calf operation, always calved in February, March. You know, when I was a kid, growing up in the 50s, early 60s, my grandfather calved in June. And he didn't calve his heifers until he didn't breed them until they were 2 years old. They calved when they were 3 years old. And then I come along and screwed it up. But I think it's the mentality of, you know, it's what everybody else is doing, you know, so you got to get that heavy calf to market at the right time in the fall, certain weight. And the other thing is, you know, maybe people are farming, they want to get the calving done. I was doing some farming then, I wanted to get the calving done so I could be free to farm and not worry about calving. I kind of got to a point in my life, if everybody around me is doing something, I decided I needed to do it differently. And they look at me like I'm crazy, you know, with all my rotational grazing and my May calving and stuff, but that's okay. I don't care, it works for me, and what they're doing is working for them, I guess, you know. But I got a neighbor that's actually he's a year older than I am. I went to country school there with, still calving in February and March, you know, and his health isn't good, but he can't change.